All right, welcome back to Nightly Sports Call. Let's get right out to the phone lines, Gene. We got David in Finleyville. How you doing, David?
Good. How about you? Thanks for taking my call, Rich.
Thanks for calling.
Okay, I want you and Gene to put your thinking cap on.
No way.
Shazier is going to be out. So how do they approach these last games? Thank you, and I'll listen to you.
Okay, thanks for your call, David. I mean, I think they have to approach, and I think they're moving forward with the thought that they might not have Ryan Shazier for the rest of the year. That's why they signed Sean Spence. And, not to put down Spence or anyone else that comes in there, they don't have another Ryan Shazier.
No.
And there might not be another Ryan Shazier in the league right now. So whoever comes in there and plays that position, it's a pretty big drop-off.
Well, it is. But we've seen many times the Steelers in this situation losing key personnel and being able to figure it out. A lot of times when people get the opportunity through whatever means necessary, they, they play above their heads, and the other players kind of rally around them, and you don't see much of a difference. But Ryan Shazier is a really, really good player, and he's hard to replace.
Yeah, I know the players want to rally around him right now, and so we'll see what the defense looks like against the Ravens Sunday night. All right, back out to the phone lines. Let's go out to John in Greentree. How you doing, John?
Hey, thanks for taking my call, guy. How you doing, man? How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having us. Thanks for
calling. Thanks for taking my call, man. Ryan Shazier, man, he's gonna be okay. Us going to face Baltimore, man. We know that we don't have him, but anyways, Baltimore is gonna be a tough team to face against us, but Ryan Shazier is gonna be okay, but
well, you know what, Gene. Let's hope Ryan Shazier is going to be okay. I know everyone's thinking about him, praying for him, and just hoping that he can walk and live a normal life. I mean, it's a dangerous sport, and you saw what can happen. It's scary when you don't see someone moving on the sidelines. Let's go back out to the phone lines. Let's go out to Ron in Aliquippa. How you doing, Ron?
Hi, guys. Doing good. My question is, what's the deal with the Steelers? Do you think there's a good chance to beat Baltimore?
That's a good question. I think they're the better team, Gene. But you lose one of your best defenders. That's going to become an issue. But I still think without Ryan Shazier that they could beat Baltimore. New England's another question, but I think that they win this game. This is the game that they always get up for.
Steelers a 7-point favorite against Baltimore. Usually a close game. I don't know. The Steelers are way, way overdue to get beat, Rich, and this might be the time.
Yeah, I actually predicted them against the Bengals. I didn't think that it was going to unfold like it did with them not playing really a first half. I thought that was the trip-up game that they were going to have. But a 7-point favorite is hard in this series.
Yeah.
When you think about how many games, I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's been so many games that have been decided by 3 points or less. Yeah. And I would not take the Steelers this week as a 7-point favorite. But I do think that they'll come out and win this game. But to me, Gene, the offense might have to start winning games for this team right now.
Well, yeah, the offense has had a couple of weeks, back-to-back weeks, when they scored 4 touchdowns. But other than that, they only scored more than 2 once all year, and they were back to scoring 2 again at Cincinnati. They made the plays when they had to, but they were not very consistent.
They were doing that a lot in the second half too, so they need to start having a more consistent total game and playing the first half like this offense has played in the second halves of recent games. All right, let's go out to Eric in Cashel Shannon. How you doing, Eric?
How you guys doing?
Good.
Hey, this is mainly for you, Gene. Just get your opinion on this. I hear Cookie talk a lot about part 1 and that the Steelers get home field advantage. My thing is, the way New England plays, assuming that's who they play, I'm guessing that's what it will, I don't see them losing on the home or at home or on the road. It seems like no matter where they go, they win, and they win handily, and that's what makes me wonder about New England. Just get your opinion.
Yeah, well, I think the Steelers have an equal chance of beating New England in either place, frankly. I know they don't play well in New England, and I know they've never beaten Brady up there. But the key to beating New England for the Steelers is not on what they do against Brady on defense. It's what they do on offense and how long they can keep Brady off the field. And they can do that up there as easily as they can here. So I don't see that game as you know, all that pivotal. I know that's the storyline of the season, but I never really subscribed to it.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those games too that New England has the Steelers' number. They seem like that they match up well against
A
the
lot
Steelers.
of people's numbers too.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, there's teams out there that I think match up better and have a better chance of knocking New England off. Maybe say someone, I don't even know if Kansas City's going to get in the playoffs now, but I'm thinking of a team like that, Baltimore, teams that maybe really get after Brady and rattle him a little bit. And you know, in not having a Shazier for that game definitely changed things for that Steelers defense. All right, let's go back out to the phone lines, and we're going to go out to Mike in Sharpsburg. How you doing, Mike?
I'm excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm glad Shazier is going to be okay.
Well, we hope. We hope. We don't know.
I'm sure he's going to, be okay.
Okay, Doc, go ahead.
2 questions for you. Wondering why the Steelers, with all the injuries to linebacker, about James Harrison, and the other question is, why has Darius Hayward-Bay been relegated to special teams when everything I've read throughout the course of the season, he's like one of the fastest guys on the team? Why isn't he on the wide receiver core? Thank you, gentlemen. I'll hang up and listen to your comments.
Hey, Mike, thanks a lot for your call. I know he is the fastest guy on the team, but he's not one of the top 3, 4 best receivers, and he's a really good special teams player if we're talking about Darius Hayward-Bay.
Can't catch.
Yeah, but he is really, you know, they like the way he plays special teams. He's a motivator, and he does a lot on special teams, so that's why he's playing and on special teams. You brought up James Harrison. Do you think that he will dress now because of this scenario or situation?
No, I don't think it changes his situation at all.
I know people have talked about it, potentially moving one of those guys inside and seeing what you can do. I don't know if it changes the situation either, but I guess they have options when it comes to that. Do you think Sean Spence plays this week? I guess everything has to play out, too.
They have to hope that he doesn't, but you know, he knows a little bit about what they do. But no, I don't expect to see Sean Spence. I think he's there for insurance.
For insurance. All right, back out to the phone lines, and we're going to go out to, let's go out to Steve. Steve out in Brentwood. How you doing, Steve?
Hey, I've got a question.
We might have an answer.
Oh, the question is for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you feel about Hillary?
All right, thanks a lot.
I prefer Beetlejuice, by the way. So.
Beetlejuice. Yeah, sometimes we get some fine calls here, Gene. Let's go out to Frank in Fineview. How you doing, Frank?
Hey, good, Rich. Gene, thank you. Hey, Shazier aside, there's been some hard hitting going on, like it was 10, 20, 30 years ago, and we loved it. It made the game intense, and now everyone's losing their mind. What's going on? Thank you.
Well, I didn't understand that question.
Well, I think, you know, maybe if he's referring to the Mike Mitchell rant today, I think he's losing his mind because he wants to. I mean, maybe they're fans. I don't know if there's people losing their minds. Maybe it's the NFL trying to be...
People losing their brains, I know that.
Yeah, the NFL is trying to do what they think is the right thing in protecting the players and protecting the future of the game. Well, these players want to play like they did, like Mike Mitchell said in his rant that you'll hear coming up on KDKA TV News at 11 o'clock, and I'm going to play the whole thing where he talked about how, you know, he played football to play football, and it's a man's sport, and he doesn't want to play flag football. I don't know where I stand on the two. I think that flags slow a lot of things down. I understand where Mike Mitchell's coming from. Yes, we do want to see the big hits, but we do not want to see guys get hurt.
Yeah, the NFL is trying to make the game safer. It's in the middle of a long transition period where players have to adjust and fans have to adjust. Not everybody's going to like it. Mike Mitchell is clearly not one of them. But it doesn't make sense not to try to make the game safer. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you want it to be safe. I mean, you want your sons out there or daughters to want to play football. But now, I mean, I don't have a son. If I did have a son, I don't know if I would let him play football. I'm just being honest. And, you know, but Mike Mitchell has a good point. You know, there's guys running 4.3s, 4.4s out there. And if the quarterback throws a bad ball and the receiver goes at it at a different position, it's hard to change what they do if they're going at their stomach and he's now down here.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game out there, and it is hard to make adjustments. But there are also players in the game who are trying to hurt people, and that's not right.
Yeah, and I would agree that Vontaze Burfict is one of those guys. And Ben Roethlisberger said today that it was kind of telling answer how, they play a lot of games between the Bengals, against the Bengals and the Ravens, but there's one team he respects, and it sounds like there's one team he doesn't. And he respects playing against the Ravens. He thinks that's obviously a good rival, and they shake hands afterwards, they're friends. But he didn't say that about the Bengals.
Yeah, I think that was pretty clear what he was trying to indicate there.
All right, well, we got to take a break. Back with more phone calls and some tweets coming up next. Stay right there.